Okay.
All right. Well, just kind of in the interest of time, and we're actually doing quite well as we start off, but that's all right. Let's leave plenty of room for conversation afterwards. But welcome back, everyone. And now I'm going to hand it over to Lorelei Skillman to share with us some insights from EY's research. Going to go through EY consumer data, talk a little bit about the current COVID-19 impact that we're seeing right now. And then, as I said, after the presentation, there's going to be a group discussion. You'll be able to use all the Zoom functions along the way. If you need to raise your hand, ask a question. But I will ask you for the next 15 minutes to write any of those questions down that you have so we can get through the data presentation. And then we can all come back together as a group and have that conversation. Lorelei, are you ready?
I'm ready. Thanks,
all
Eric.
Right. I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say I'm so excited to see everyone. I know all of us are stuck all day and sometimes all night on these Zoom and Teams calls, and I feel like it's always with the same people. So it's really nice to see some of my familiar friends and familiar faces from the industry. So this talk today, I know we're all coming from various parts of the financial services industry, but I thought it would be really helpful to share some survey data that EY has been conducting. It's specifically around banking and payments, but I think the insights are definitely applicable more broadly. So I thought I would kind of start with that. And then I'll talk a little bit about how EY's brand marketing and communications teams have responded in light of the pandemic, and then kind of open it up to hear how you guys have been handling it. So let me just do a screen share. Okay, great. So hopefully that's working. So EY has been doing research in the consumer space for quite some time. And we have a new offering out called the Future Consumer Index. As you may know, EY goes to market by 8 different industry market segments, financial services being one of those, and consumer is another one of our industry markets. And so this research was led by our consumer practice. And I think the cool thing about it is that they kicked it off in April, and they're going back and surveying consumers every 3 weeks. And so what I'm going to show you today is from the first survey that was conducted in late April. And I was hoping that I would have the May data to show you today. Unfortunately, I do not, but I'll be happy to follow up with you on that. So the Future Consumer Index is tracking changing consumer sentiment and behaviors around the globe. And it's also identifying new consumer segments that are emerging. And this index is really designed to kind of see how consumers are responding in light of the pandemic, and it's kind of capturing their thoughts at this point in time, but also how they're thinking that things and or their behavior might change in the future. So you can see for the first wave, we had nearly 5,000 respondents broken out across Canada, France, Germany, the UK, and the US. And in the May survey, we actually have expanded that quite a bit, including into Asia and China. And so what I'm going to focus on today was just some of the questions we asked specifically around banking and payments. And we all know that, you know, all of our businesses have drastically changed in light of the pandemic. And in particular, banks are wondering about how these changes are going to impact them over the longer term, right? Are consumers going to come back to branches? Do they still need to have branches? People using more digital payments and contactless payments, is that something that's going to stick? And so this report is really highlighting the way COVID-19 is reshaping those customers' behaviors. And so there's kind of 4 factors that we see for banks to consider as they think about how they're going to interact with their customers kind of post-COVID. The way people bank has changed, but it might not yet be permanent. We also see that the end of cash has never been closer, and that's something that we were talking about, you know, many months prior to COVID, and now it's obviously accelerated. Responsible banking and those ideas around sustainable finance are now more important than ever. And customers are really demanding greater flexibility and security. And so we'll dive into these just a little more. Sorry, and I'm just hiding the thumbnail there. You can see that 43% of respondents say the way they bank has changed, specifically due to COVID. 2/3 of consumers are visiting physical stores less, and only 24% of respondents expect to bank more online in the next 12 to 24 months. 16% of respondents state that the way they bank will change over the longer term because of COVID. And so I think the thing that we're talking to a lot of our customers about, our banking customers, is that, you know, with this quick flight to online and digital and contactless, if that's something that banks really want to stick with in the future, they really need to invest in marketing to build awareness of the options that are available, and to really help support those more vulnerable customers that don't feel as ease using digital channels. And so it'll be interesting to see, you know, of the people that have gone digital, are they really just doing it because they have to, and they're going to race back to the physical once they're allowed to. On the second point, the end of cash, 57% of respondents say they are using cash less, specifically due to the pandemic. It's definitely been in decline for some time, and we actually have some research on that if you're interested. But it's rapidly been falling. Use of credit cards by consumers is now up 7% net as of the end of April. Debit cards 10%, and then online payment tools 14%. And even when people are still able to go to the store for essentials, for example, groceries, contactless has really become the preferred payment option, up 34%. And I saw an early cut of the May data, and that's now up, I want to say 15 to 20% more in May since this first April survey. So 20% of respondents are expecting to be using cash less and more contactless payments in the future. And then interesting, I thought, people are still even more, I shouldn't even say still, more now concerned about banks behaving ethically and doing the right thing. Obviously, the banks are a huge transmission mechanism for a lot of the stimulus packages, and so they're really at the forefront of a lot of these issues. More than half of the respondents in our survey indicate that their future purchasing decisions will be impacted by firms acting positively. And that statement is kind of general across all industry markets. But again, you know, banks are really on the front line right now in terms of supporting consumers through the crisis. And so they really need to be aware of that reputational risk that they face. When customers are feeling uneasy with the digital methods or feeling like they're not getting the support that they need. Only 17% of respondents say they completely trust financial service firms in the current context. And of course, only the media have lower trust. So that's probably not anything new, but certainly now more highlighted in light of the pandemic. And then finally, you know, customers really wanting more flexibility and security. So 27% of respondents say they expect banks to be more flexible in the future. 26% of our consumers expect to invest more in being prepared for the future. And banks obviously are going to play a huge role in helping those customers become better prepared for the future in terms of savings and insurance and other income-soothing products. So with a quarter of individuals saying they'd be willing to pay a premium for products that promote well-being, I think that's another opportunity that certainly goes beyond the banking space, even obviously outside of financial services. So I'll stop the share there. So I just thought that was kind of some interesting data to kind of set the stage for the discussion. In terms of, you know, how EY has handled it, I'm sure very similar to many of you. You know, the first thing was obviously kind of halt all activity out in the marketplace and really take the time to assess, you know, what the current messages were, and really focused on quickly building a framework around which we could map all of our marketing and communications. And I'm just going to refer to my notes here for a second, but we came up with kind of specific objectives in terms of our COVID response, and really wanted to position EY as, you know, that support mechanism to really position ourselves as a strategic advisor to the C-suite during these times. And it's interesting, you know, a lot of the things we've been talking to our clients about over the last many months and even years have to do with digitization and automation of their services, and, you know, different types of technology enabled transformation. And those are now actually all the more important in light of COVID. We're hearing from our clients that, you know, in the short term, they had to pause a lot of their activities, but now they're starting to look at those projects and really accelerate them, because the need to go digital and have that robust customer experience is now all the more important. And so we created a specific framework that we call Now, Next, and Beyond. And we, when the pandemic really first happened in early March, and to be honest, our Asia Pac offices were obviously feeling it much earlier, but really globally, we kind of mobilized around this concept of Now, Next, and Beyond, and really wanted to help clients in the height of the pandemic, helping them respond to business continuity and enterprise resilience issues. And so we really focused all of our content and our messaging around that. And then slowly we've been kind of moving into what we call the next phase, which is, we define it as adapting operations and increasing business resilience in what we think is going to be more of a seesaw recovery, meaning that things will get a little bit better and then probably retrench, a little bit better, retrench, and kind of rinse and repeat, versus maybe a U or an L-shaped recovery. And so we're still kind of in that phase of focusing a lot of our content and our conversations and our efforts around next, but we're also now starting to talk about the beyond. So what happens as companies think about coming out of COVID? And we state it as really reframing your organization's future and transforming to succeed. So, you know, getting them kind of through the thick of the crisis, but then starting to have an eye toward the future. And that's so far been pretty successful. Obviously, it needs to be tailored to kind of each client and even different geographies, because obviously Asia is in a very different place even than some of the oceanic countries, and obviously versus Europe and the Americas. And so people are in kind of different states, different customers, different regions. Some are still in the next, some are moving to the beyond, et cetera. So I think, you know, with that, I'll just kind of pause. I think Eric had said leaving questions to the end. I don't know, Eric, if you wanted to open that up now or just kind of move into a discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think actually you could do both those things. First, thank you so much, Lorelei. Very, very interesting, and very interested to kind of see, particularly on some of the kind of the contactless card payments, where that goes, and we see even more adoption as we move into the rest of the year. So thank you for all that information. But as you said, now it's part of our conversation, and would love to get different perspective. And I liked how you were nodding to your Asia Pac team already, where obviously that region was feeling more of the impact earlier on. So we'd like to get the global perspective on some of this, and questions from the global audience as well about what do we think about the data? Do we think there might be trends that we see developing in one geography over another? So yeah, we can open it up to conversation.
Great. Does anyone want to share perhaps how you personally or your firm has really looked at marketing and communications in light of the pandemic?
Hi, Lorelei. It's Christoph Warman from Deutsche Bank. First of all, many thanks for sharing your observations. And I absolutely like the categorization of the now, the next, and beyond, because it's a very good guiding tool. As marketeers, we need to make sure that we're not just all the time following the herd, but we actually put goalposts in to help clients navigate. So maybe as a quick reflection on what we have done here as well at Deutsche, and what I would like to say to all of us in marketing: if you don't have a robust content strategy in place. If you haven't had it before COVID, it would have exposed it pretty much, because we were all suddenly within a couple of days in complete response mode. And there's one thing to say, okay, first of all, create transparency and help clients
Everyone.
with the current issues. It's about having the right channels and having a good way of delivering it to clients, because we are still dealing with a lot of lean forward customers who are not using digital that much and rely on the face-to-face interaction, or telephone for that matter. So responding very quickly, responding in a way that you have reliable channels, making sure that you absolutely refrain from pushing products, but just pushing advice, because in the first weeks it was all about the resilience, or building resilience, that operations continue. And that's why having a good plan in place that covered your now, and then move to the next phase, to the next, and to the beyond, is a very good template, I think, for all of us.
Eric, I was not able to hear that. I don't know if it's just me.
You got
Oh no, I heard him right in the beginning, and then I couldn't hear very well.
Yeah, but it sounded like, Christoph, if I was hearing it correctly, because I could hear it faintly, you were kind of talking about just how this pandemic exposed people's marketing communications. And some of it was, if you had a plan in place, like, you could still continue to execute on it, but if not, you're immediately into response mode. Was a big part of that. And then the second part too, and perhaps though, if I could ask you to recap just talking a little bit more about having a plan versus response mode, but then also the consumer behaviors that you were observing, I think is where it got very, very faint for all of us.
I'm so sorry. I try to speak up a bit more. I'm based in the UK, so don't be surprised if the lines break. But anyway, what I would like to say is we have to keep in mind that we can, of course, only currently see what the immediate reaction of consumers is. I'm not in the consumer space, I'm in the B2B space, but what we get from our clients, of course, or everybody, and even in your personal experience, you see a change consumer behavior, and you would be tempted that this is long-term, an indication of, we heard it all, the death of cash. Even our research colleagues have spoken about that. But let's be aware of the fact that if we will find a new normal very quickly, I don't think we are going to see drastic changes. It's the same in events. Everybody is now falling over themselves to find good digital platforms. I do think that we are going back to a 70-30% split of physical and 30% digital. So I think, as everything in life, we have to, of course, see that change is knocking the door loudly and has to be let in. But let's not fall over ourselves, and let's make sure, what Lorelei just said, that we have a good plan to partner our clients who currently have one thing and only one thing in mind, is being operationally active, making sure that they don't lose their staff, not their markets, not their supply chain. So they don't have a lot of ears now for strategic dialogue.
Thank you. Any thoughts or response to Christoph's statements?
Yeah, just a comment here. It's Nicola from Go Cardless, also in the UK, which means it's after 6, which is why you might have seen me with my glass of wine after an afternoon of Zoom calls. Just to comment on that, because I think the information that Lorelei presented was really interesting, but probably not surprising. I think if you just take it from your personal experience, you could relate to all of those things. So this is maybe, I don't know if you have the information, Lorelei, but anybody who is more in the B2B space, whether you're seeing that similar effect with business customers in terms of, where they may be more behind the curve in terms of adoption of technology, the way that they bank, the way that they manage their payments, those sorts of things, particularly if I think about the US, where, you know, paper-based checks are very prevalent, whether you're seeing a bigger move in that sense towards kind of looking at digital services and much more online banking, where it's maybe lagged a little bit up until now.
I think that's a really good point. Does anybody else want to contribute from what they're seeing from a B2B perspective? I think that's obviously an important part, and a lot of us are from that space.
Hi everyone, I'm Leslie with SCI, and obviously we're an outsourced provider. And I think, you know, to your point, Lorelei, those phases of communication, and at first, it was a lot of business continuity communications. They wanted to make sure that we were supporting their infrastructure operationally to a T. Now we've moved into more of they're seeking counsel from us because we were so strong operationally. We're having innovation communities where they're asking us how to plan for their own and how to improve their technology, and they're seeing the prevalence and the demand, the consumer demand for that digital experience.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know we're all undergoing a bit of digital fatigue, right? With these Zoom after Zoom after Zoom that seem to start at, you know, crazy hours in the morning and go through to the evening. So it's interesting to think about that from your customer's perspective, right? Whether you're B2B or B2C, and how are you addressing that?
Hi, it's Kate Woodjack here from HSBC. I'm on the B2B side as well, looking after the communications and content. I think from our perspective, and in the current climate, we're absolutely obviously seeing businesses face unprecedented pressure, and I think, you know, they are looking to organizations like ours to produce content that can help them, that can, you know, provide some guidance, and what we are trying to do is look at ways in which, you know, to your earlier point, we can draw upon the different phases that businesses are at with the whole crisis. So, you know, drawing on perhaps, you know, from Asia, where they are starting to move out of the crisis ahead of, you know, parts of the US and Western Europe, and just share more of these personal reflections from businesses. So rather than it being a big corporate and their views out, it's more about sharing the insights of these businesses. And we've kind of taken the tactic of looking at react, respond and rebound, because that's where we see that businesses are going to be moving, and obviously some will be at the rebound stage ahead of others. But to the other point around digitalization, we have seen dramatically, like pretty much overnight, businesses who we were struggling to do the digital piece absolutely move onto those platforms. And with regards to kind of trade documentation and things like that, we've just seen, you know, dramatic increases, and it's good. It's you know, it's supported sustainability measures and others. So we have seen some real movement in that space.
Lorelei, I wanted to go back to the question you asked before about digital fatigue. And it's been interesting. It's starting to come up more and more now, as I think as we're kind of coming to the end of the second quarter and looking at the third quarter, where people are starting to say like, okay, we're gonna have to do this forever. And to your point about like handling the digital fatigue, and, you know, obviously at Vested we're a client organization, so a lot of it's how we work with our clients. And I think what we've started to do is just to tell the clients, like, you know, we don't have to do this over Zoom. If it's a call in which we're going through an agenda of items that are mostly talking points, we can do it as a call. And asking the clients too, like, what is your preference as well? But just kind of giving people that that break and the ability to say, it's all right, we don't all have to be camera facing today, I think has been well received. I know personally, I enjoy standing up and looking out the window from time to time, which so the Zoom chair doesn't always lend itself quite well to.
I'm also going to add my personal tip here, which if anyone hasn't learned to do it yet, learning how to press the hide self view button on Zoom is the best thing that I read about. So apparently, as humans, we all spend our time, if we can see ourselves, checking ourselves out and making sure we're looking okay. And actually, if you turn it off, you find your brain works far better because you're focused on everyone else and not yourself. So if you haven't got that yet, top right hand corner, I highly recommend it to
Love
you.
it. Love it.
So, Lorelei, can I ask a question actually about the research? It's my name's Amanda Rendell. I'm a non-exec at the British Business Bank and Tesco Bank, so I do both retail and business. One of the things that I think is going to come out of COVID, which your questions don't explore yet, but I wonder whether you might, is the social implications of COVID and how that's going to impact banking. So if I think about the future of cash, you know, there are still 3 million people in this country, in the UK, that don't have bank accounts. So one of the things that we've had to do at Tesco is produce gift cards so they can go and buy food. So I'm just intrigued to know where some of this stuff might go and what you think about that.
No, agreed. I don't believe that this particular survey does cover that, but it's definitely something that EY is in conversations with clients about, that concept of responsible banking, open banking, you know, banking for the bankless. Obviously, that's very key. I throw it out to the group. Is there anyone here that where your firm has been thinking about that or is putting together some sort of a solution? I don't know how many bankers we have represented here today.
I think it's an interesting one. And I wouldn't be surprised if people aren't thinking about it actually, because I think we're so still in the crisis that I think we've still got a way to go to see where COVID's going to leave us. So I mean, and you know, to Kate's point about business banking, I'm working, well, I'm a non-exec for the bank that's putting together all the loan support packages for all the British businesses. It's been hard, you know, because a lot of those businesses will not get, they'll get the money, but they still probably won't be there at the end of it. So, and Kate's right, it's about giving them hope and advice and, you know, and being there for them through all of this. It's going to be, it's tough.
No, right, and that's obviously a key part of the communication strategy, and not only communications, right, but product strategy in terms of, you know, that's a fairly large segment of the audience, and how do you address that?
Yep, completely agree.
I agree, and I think actually I want to be positive about this, and there is good to come from everything, but I think the worst is yet to come, because as we know from previous downturns, and I know Elsbeth will remember this quote from a few years back, but businesses are more likely to fail when they're coming out of a recession or a crisis than when they're actually in it, because, you know, it's the point at which they start to reopen, when orders come in and all of those sorts of things. So yeah, it's absolutely about being there to support them and offer them the things that they need and at the right time. So yeah, let's just hope that we're all able to do that.
Agreed.
I ask a question. I'm interested in what people have done. I think you've all talked about, and certainly we've been working with all of our clients, exactly as Lorelei and Kate, you've described about what you did immediately and then how you shifted it as well. I guess I'm interested in, have people found any particular tactics or channels or approaches particularly successful over the last few months? Because I think that, you know, we've seen significant change, people pulling out of straight advertising, shifts in terms of what they're doing on social. Christoph, to your point, thinking about content in a different way. I would just love if anyone's got any particular learnings on the immediate that might be helpful for the group.
Well, one thing I would throw out just in terms of learnings is we had to radically reassess our LinkedIn strategy, because in light of this, we had so many different parts of our organization trying to quickly communicate. And it was like everybody was, you know, looking at LinkedIn as one example of the fastest, easiest channel. And we quickly realized we're inundating people with information, and we had to really quickly pare that back and prioritize.
Laura, like, how did you do that as a global organization with lots of different business lines and different people? Because I assume that's part of what sits within your role. How do you actually organizationally manage to overcome that? Because I suspect there's quite a few people on this call who go, yeah, I feel that. How did you get there?
Absolutely. I mean, it was really, so I'm, within the financial services segment, so it was really kind of at the layer above in terms of that corporate layer. But luckily, the digital teams quickly did an assessment of, how many messages are going out, what are the topics, who are we targeting, and came back to us with that data. And we all immediately were just, shocked and abhorred about it. And so it was just, quickly putting guidelines in place. And so we map everything back to our now, next, and beyond. How relevant is the communication for this week versus next week versus a month from now? We looked at ways of consolidating messages, and we even just put physical daily limits on numbers of messages that could go out to audiences, and a quick kind of editorial committee that helped with prioritizing and looking at content and seeing what need to be elevated and what maybe could be better used in another channel.
I would say, Elspeth. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, really interesting. Go on.
For us, we're focused on, we're heavily investing in our tech stack right now and building out our digital strategy. And I think for us, we're really leveraging our platforms in a way where we're looking across all the data sets, whether it's social listening or AI, predictive analytics, to really understand in each of our markets, what are they focused on? So we can then tailor, especially as now we're moving back into our sales agendas. And it's that delicate balance of not too much, but not too little, really understanding how to meet them where they're at. So we're still engaging them and pulling them in.
I'm with a boutique investment bank in northern New Jersey, and we've done kind of a step back in time out of the digital space. Because our clients I have a very targeted audience of middle market clients across the country, but we're just talking to business owners as well as centers of influence, lawyers and accountants. And what we did was we took to the phones because we were concerned about the inundation that our prospective clients were getting digitally. And so we had people on the phones 10 hours a day, just picking up, how are you? What are you doing? How can we help? And the response that we have gotten is unbelievable. Those business owners we weren't selling them anything. We were just talking to them. And they were a lot of things. They were grateful. They were more open than typically they would be. And they were also more available. And they actually seemed happy to talk to us. And as a result of that, we aggregated a lot of information to really get a sense as to where our audience was. And then as it happened, we also picked up some clients in the process, but which was not the intent. So now, of course, we did maintain our digital presence, the social media, with emailing information, but really on a rolled back basis. I mean, we could see where our email opens just began to decline, even though they were on their natural programming. We saw that business owners opened at a lower rate, but we did see that our centers of influence began opening at a higher rate. So they were looking for more information that we were able to feed them that they could bring to their clients. So just a little combination of all marketing tactics, but the telephones were amazing.
That's
it's
great.
Such a great point, I think, especially when everyone is isolated, to think through just the importance of human contact, right? And remember that clients are people first. And one of the things that we've done, is I think we probably field one of the largest, if not the largest, direct sales force in financial technology at Bloomberg. So, we're accustomed to being on the desk with people on a daily, weekly basis. That's the basis of our intimate relationship with our clients. And one of the very first things that we did starting with our offices in Asia, as this started to happen there, was we focused on sales and support as our primary channel of communication. So, you know, obviously the stuff that is business as usual was business as usual to the extent that business was as usual. But really, you know, we very quickly moved to empower our sales and support teams to have a, you know, consistent, empathetic approach where we were providing them with all the information that we thought clients would want to hear from the company, and empowering it to go through that channel. And I think it was very successful. Clients, you know, I think to Joan's point, clients were extremely appreciative of the outreach, especially in the early weeks where they were completely unclear on what they needed to focus on. And just by us, I think, calling and asking them some questions about how we could help them focus on the kinds of help they needed, right? And so I think that was really successful, and we continue to employ that strategy as we move into sort of the existential phase now, right? So.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for all of that. And just with an eye toward the time and making sure that we wrap all of this up in time for our next Zoom meeting, which will be right after this one. I'm going to first say, everyone, please join me in offering a round of applause and a tremendous thank you to Lorelei for that information and for this great conversation. So thank you, everyone, for all of that.